The Caribbean Sea, 3:27 p.m., December 10th, 2020. A Venezuelan oil tanker steams north. Its cargo, $30 million in sanctioned crude oil. Then suddenly the sky filled with American military helicopters. Elite soldiers rappelled onto the deck. Weapons drawn. In minutes it was over. The tanker was seized. Venezuela's President Maduro called it piracy. The Pentagon called it justice. But this was far from the first strike. It was the 23rd clash in a shadow war that had already left 87 people dead, 22 boats destroyed, an entire U.S. carrier strike group on patrol, 15,000 American troops. The largest American military deployment to the Caribbean in 30 years. This is the story of how Venezuela finally crossed the line, and how the United States Navy responded with overwhelming force, and why the Caribbean could become America's next war zone. For years, Venezuela was a problem, but not a full-blown crisis. Dictator Nicolas Maduro, human rights abuses, economic collapse. 7 million refugees had already fled the nation. But America tolerated it. Sanctions, diplomatic pressure, but no direct military action. Then on September 2nd, 2025, everything changed. A speedboat launched from the Venezuelan coast. Its destination, the Florida shoreline. Its payload, 2 tons of pure cocaine. The U.S. Coast Guard detected the vessel. The chase was on. The smugglers refused to stop. At 3:15 p.m., a U.S. Navy destroyer fired a warning shot. Then it fired for effect. The boat exploded. 3 crew members were killed instantly. Venezuela's state media erupted in outrage. Their headline, "America had murdered innocent fishermen." But the Pentagon had proof. Photographs of cocaine bales, intercepted cartel communications, solid links to a major drug lord. This wasn't murder. This was a counter-narcotics operation, eliminating a direct threat to American lives. But Venezuela didn't back down. They escalated. More boats, more drugs, faster routes, bigger shipments. Maduro's calculation was simple. They believed America wouldn't risk a war over mere speedboats. By October, they knew they were wrong. U.S. forces had already struck 6 more of their vessels. The body count began 15 dead. By November, the losses mounted. 12 vessels destroyed, 38 dead. By December, the toll was 22 vessels, 87 dead. And then yesterday, they took the biggest prize yet, an entire oil tanker. This wasn't about drugs. This was sanctioned oil. A secret deal Venezuela selling to Iran, funding a rogue regime, defying international law. At 3:27 p.m. December 10th, the USS Gerald R was given the order. America's deadliest and most advanced aircraft carrier. It launched helicopters carrying elite special operations forces. They rappelled silently onto the tanker's deck. The crew gave up without a fight. The tanker, worth $30 million, was seized. The crew was arrested, a humiliation for Maduro's government. But this was just a single strike. The real story is the massive military buildup happening in the shadows right now. 15,000 U.S. troops, 12 warships, an armada including the Gerald R. Ford F-35 fighters and advanced drones. And beneath the waves, submarines. The Pentagon has a name for it, counter-narcotics operations. But everyone else sees it for what it truly is. The prelude to war, the Caribbean Sea, December 2025. This is the largest American military deployment in this region since the 1989 invasion of Panama. The centerpiece, the USS Gerald R. a nuclear-powered supercarrier, 90 fighter jets, 5,000 sailors. The USS Baton, an amphibious assault ship. On board, 2,000 battle-ready Marines with their helicopters and landing craft. They are backed by 10 guided missile destroyers and 2 nuclear attack submarines hunting in the deep. The number of special operations forces remains classified. This is not a patrol, this is an invasion force. Venezuela knows it. Their military is on maximum alert. Coastal defenses have been activated. Their Russian-supplied air defense systems are online. But here is the terrifying reality for the Maduro regime. Venezuela cannot win a military showdown with the United States of America. The United States commands 11 carrier strike groups. Venezuela has none. America fields the most advanced 5th-generation stealth fighters on the planet. Venezuela flies Soviet-era jets relics from the 1970s. America's military budget over $800 billion. Venezuela's entire economy a mere $50 billion. The numbers are brutal, but its leader Maduro believed he had one card left to play. His strategy was to make any American action politically devastating. He was watching the American polls. They showed 76% of the public opposed military action in Venezuela. The American people were weary of foreign wars. So Maduro's strategy was dangerously simple. He would force America to invade, triggering a political disaster for the White House. Or he would force them to back down, making America look weak. It was a fatal mistake. This American president did not back down. On November 28, Thanksgiving Day, the president addressed the troops via a secure video link. Venezuela's narcotic rings are a direct threat to American families. We will eliminate this threat by any means necessary. So why did Venezuela truly matter to the United States? There were three reasons, and none of them were really about narcotics. First, geopolitics. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world. It is a nation allied with Russia, Iran, and China. Maduro's regime was a hostile power, a threat just 90 miles from the shores of Florida. If America failed to act, its adversaries would gain a permanent foothold, deep inside the Western Hemisphere. Second, migration. 7 million Venezuelans had already fled their collapsing country. Many were heading for the U.S.-Mexico border. The president had campaigned on ending illegal immigration. Venezuela's chaos was fueling the very crisis he vowed to stop. Third, credibility. The president had threatened Maduro. He had drawn a red line in the sand. Now the entire world was watching. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. If America backed down, every adversary would learn that its threats were empty. But if America acted, every adversary would learn a powerful lesson. Do not test American resolve. But this is the terrifying part. This was how a real war could actually begin. Venezuela's military fields 200,000 active personnel. They are trained by Russia and advised by Cuba. Their weapons are supplied by Iran, including the formidable S-300 air defense system. They command anti-ship missiles and powerful coastal artillery. An American invasion here would not be a repeat of Iraq. In Iraq, the military collapsed in just 3 weeks. Venezuela could fight for months, maybe even years, waging a brutal guerrilla war in its jungles and cities. The potential cost: thousands of American casualties and tens of thousands of Venezuelan civilian deaths. And for what? To remove a dictator most Americans couldn't find on a map. This is the scenario that terrifies military analysts. This is why Congress demands answers. And this is why even the president's staunchest allies are nervous. The pieces are in place for a war, but it's a war nobody wants, except perhaps the men in charge. Because both leaders need an enemy, both thrive on conflict, both benefit politically from the brink of confrontation. During wartime, Americans rally around their president, and Maduro uses the threat of American aggression to justify his own dictatorship. It's a death spiral, and the nations of the Caribbean can only watch in horror. The world is fractured over Venezuela. America's traditional allies are mostly silent. NATO has no appetite to back another U.S. intervention. The countries of Latin America have long memories of American invasions. The president of Brazil has called for peace negotiations. Mexico has issued a stark warning against military action. And Colombia, Venezuela's neighbor, desperately wants to avoid a full-blown war on its border. But America's adversaries, they are watching. In October, Russia dispatched warships to Venezuela. The official reason was training exercises, but it was a clear message to Washington. A message that said, "We are here too." China, Venezuela's largest creditor, has warned America against illegal military operations. They have $30 billion invested in Venezuelan oil. Iran calls it American imperialism. They provide weapons to the Venezuelan military. They buy its sanctioned oil and help fund Maduro's regime. The world was watching. Even the United Nations spoke out. Secretary General Guterres was blunt. The strikes in international waters were not compatible with international law. And he wasn't alone. Legal scholars agreed. killing men on the high seas without trial or evidence. It violated both American law and the laws of war. On Capitol Hill, the backlash began. An investigation was launched. Democrats demanded hearings. Even some Republicans questioned the strategy. But the White House didn't care about legal scholars or congressional investigations. They cared about results. And the results so far were 87 dead and 22 boats destroyed, one supertanker seized. But the mission's stated goal was a failure. Venezuela's drug trafficking was barely affected. Cocaine still flowed north. Venezuela's government was still in power. Maduro was still president. The only thing that had changed was that America was now on the brink of war. And nobody knew how to stop it. 3:27 p.m. December 10th. U.S. forces seize Venezuela's largest oil tanker. The toll, 87 people dead in 22 previous strikes. The buildup, 15,000 American troops massing in the Caribbean. One aircraft carrier, 12 warships. The largest military deployment to the region in 30 years. This was no longer about counter-narcotics. This was regime change. This was preparation for war. And Maduro knew it. His defiance was desperation. His threats were born from fear. Because if America decided to strike inside Venezuela, his regime would end. His military could not stop cruise missiles. They could not defend against F-35s. They could not survive American firepower. But the American president had a problem too. The American people did not want another war. They did not want another Iraq or Afghanistan. So the world watched the standoff. The president threatening, Maduro defying, both men hoping the other would back down first. But they were wrong. Neither would. Which means one of two things happens next. America invades Venezuela, topples Maduro and occupies the country. One choice, face a bloody guerrilla war. A new quagmire with no end in sight. The other option, America retreats. An admission of defeat, fueling every adversary watching. Two paths, both lead to disaster. The Caribbean, December 2025. This is the endgame when superpowers play a dangerous game. And neither side is willing to blink first. The cost so far, 87 dead, 15,000 troops deployed. Only one question remains: will this end with peace or total war?